welcome to the Being Human group, how to build team resilience. It is a topic, like I said, that has garnered huge amount of interest amongst the people that we know. And so the rationale behind this was to provide you with a little bit of an overview, some practical tools and approaches about how to think resilience, how to frame resilience, and how to approach resilience when you are building your team or making your team more stress-proof. The Building Your Team Resilience workshop and overview today is part of the BHG Strength Masterclass session, or a group of topics. And so we have a number of topics in our Strengths Masterclass series where we connect strengths to things like resilience, communication, influence, and impact. You're very welcome to reach out to us if you are interested in that space. So who are we? We are, as you know, the Being Human group. BHG, I'm proud to say, is an award-winning Gallup strategic licensee. In actual fact, we were one of the first international partners Gallup ever appointed in their international and globalization rollout. We look after the area called Africa, so from Cape to Cairo, Nairobi through to Lagos, and everywhere in between. We seek to empower people, positively disrupt workplaces, and change the way people lead by using the science of strengths. We're also members of the International Coaching Federation, and as I mentioned, an award-winning strategic licensee. So when we think about resilience, there's quite a popular misconception. The popular misconception equates resilience with mental toughness, being stoic, and enduring. So if you are of that age, you will see that we've put a picture there of Chuck Norris as an epitome of being tough, stoic, and enduring. But it's a misconception. Resilient people experience the same feelings, emotions, and stresses when it comes to challenging times. What differentiates them is they are simply able to deal better with such challenges. And so our approach to resilience is about saying that we can build resilience. We can help you to become more resilient. We can help you to manage stress in a better way. And in many ways, we can help you to prevent the dreaded burnout. But just to make sure that we're all on the same page is once you are, if you ever get into that unfortunate place of burnout, there are other approaches that will work as well. Ours is very much, how can we prevent, how can we enable people to deal with stress better, and how can we help them to recover from that edge when the stress is no longer tolerable. We work in the strength development and coaching space, and to that end, if it gets to a need around therapy, then we will refer those to our therapy colleagues. So when it comes to resilience, the reality is you can't control the wind. And what we mean by that is that life is complicated. It's going to be challenging. We cannot ever have a non-stress environment. So you can't control the wind, but what you can do is adjust the sails. In other words, your response to complexity, ambiguity, and paradox is really in your own gift. And so from a resilience point of view, we see it as a continuum. What we want to do is to build your capacity to deal with it, to achieve stretch or excellence whilst dealing with stress, and then also to provide you with the tools that you also, so that you can recover from extended stress. So build, stretch, and recover. We're going to really just share the call to action, the state of organizations in Africa, and do that in a way to compare that with what's happening globally, to see that this issue around resilience and the topical nature of it is really based on what's happening in workplaces across the globe. We're going to frame the resilience conversation by introducing you to the stress curve and stages of burnout. We're going to share an approach that we use when we link strengths and resilience, and then we're going to share some ideas around tools to facilitate and ensure that people are recovering or re-energizing or making sure that their energy is not totally depleted. So to that end, why is resilience so important? Well, the reality is that employee engagement, employee engagement for us is really employee motivation and energy and discretionary effort. In other words, if employees are highly engaged, they're going to bring more effort, energy, and commitment to the workplace. So employee engagement and well-being have been hard hit in the post-COVID world environment. I'm sure all of you I'm sure this resonates with all of you in different ways. I think, Marita and myself, when we were talking about preparing for this, we were thinking a little bit about what is the level of our stress. And I have to say, some of the things that we've been challenged to really respond to and to manage COVID, post-COVID, hybrid workplaces, some of the very difficult experiences people have gone through has meant that I think that engagement and well-being is certainly under pressure. This is from the Gallup Global State of the Workforce Report 2022. If you are keen on having a look at the global numbers and also for Africa as a region, just reach out to us and we will send you this report. The global workforce, though, and this is the latest Gallup research, indicates that 44% of employees globally experience stress a lot of the previous day. So if you think about your day yesterday, 44%, 1 in 2 employees globally experienced a lot of stress. It should give you a bit of an indication of just how employees are struggling. If we look at that from a sub-Saharan Africa point of view, and we look at employee engagement, regionally for sub-Saharan Africa, only 21% of Africans are engaged, 1 in 5. This mirrors quite closely what's happening globally, where 21% is engaged. Now, if only 1 in 5 employees are engaged, it means 4 out of 5 are disengaged or actively disengaged. It means that 80% of the workforce is not in the space of motivation or enablement that they need to be the best versions of themselves and to perform optimally. And that gives us a really big call to action. In comparison, when we ask people about life evaluation, in other words, are they thriving as people in their community, financially, in a work position, socially, for the region, only 21% said that their life evaluation is positive. In contrast to globally, where it's sitting at 33%. The call to action here is as follows. If we look at employee engagement, it's not high. If we look at life evaluation, it's not high. It's not high at all. And when engagement and life evaluation start dropping, stress increases, people feel under pressure, and they enter the zone of burnout far easier than if they were motivated and engaged, and if their life evaluation was higher. The question then arises for us as managers and work and developing teams is, what can we do about this? And this is what we're going to share with you in the rest of the session is how can we start to think about engagement and life evaluation from a resilience perspective, building that capacity to deal with the winds that blow us from day to day. So I'm going to share a little bit of a resilience framework that works for us, and we'll play around a little bit with this, and I'll ask you for your input. So heads up. I'm sure we've all come across various notions of the stress curve. And really what the stress curve says to us is that, if you are in this sphere, the green sphere, there's probably not enough stress to get you out of bed in the morning. You're pretty inactive, you're pretty laid back. It doesn't really give you much from a performance point of view. So some stress is good. Too much stress, of course, is obviously problematic. And really you want to be in this zone here, which is about how do I have optimal stress in terms of getting going and matching that sort of drive for performance. But very quickly, we can tip over the edge and enter that too much stress zone. And that's what we want to avoid. And then as we're starting to see with many teams that we're working with, is this zone of anxiety, panic, and anger, where people actually just physically and emotionally break down. How can we build the capacity of people so that they can manage to stay in this zone, the zone where there's optimal stress. How can we understand and help them identify what are the risk factors or things that could topple them into the zone of too much stress, and how can they avoid that? And then finally, how can they re-energize, recover, and make sure that they are in the optimal stress zone? Because if you go and you're continuously exposed to too much stress, it's going to deplete your energy. And part of breakdown and anxiety and panic and anger is that I just don't have the energy to deal with the situation. So the stress curve is really quite a nice way of thinking about that. And I'm sure you as individuals are starting to go, well, where am I in terms of the stress curve? Well, we're going to give you another tool that could be really useful to help you think about it. And this is what we call the burnout prevention, the 12 stages of burnout. The problem with burnout and entering that red zone is it often creeps up on you without you realizing it. So stage one is you feel there is a strong need to prove yourself. Stage two, you keep working harder and harder to achieve this. 90% of the teamwork that we do across Africa is teams are just working harder and harder just to keep the same level of performance. And of course, if you consume more and more energy and you're not replacing that, it's going to be problematic. And then at stage three, you begin to neglect your own needs more. This is when your well-being starts dropping. Stage four, you're conflicted and blame others for the situation. You become really quite difficult to be around. Stage five, you change your values to focus on work more. Stage six, you deny the problems that arise due to work stress. Denial is a strong blind spot here. Stage seven, you withdraw from social life and your family as well. 8, your behavior changes, which upsets your loved ones. 9, depersonalization happens and you do not feel like yourself. 10, you feel numb, empty, and perhaps there's a chance of substance abuse. 11, depression, lost and completely exhausted. You notice the exhaustion there and why we place so much emphasis on recovery. You mentally and physically collapse and you enter full burnout. I know, Mafrit, in our discussion, I was mentioning to you that I firmly feel that I'm in stage two. I just feel sometimes that we're working harder and harder just to stand still on occasion. And we've talked a little bit about how to keep the energy up and keep the motivation up, because I think and a lot of people in corporates at the moment are just working such long hours. And it seems to be quite a challenge. So certainly I can see a lot of stage twos. Certainly I understand the tipping point of 3 and 4 and 5. Hopefully nobody is in a higher stage than that. The reality is some stress is good. You want to keep it in the optimal space. But if you don't make sure that you are re-energizing, making sure that your approach is sustainable, you're going to topple, and it's quite, stage 12 sneaks up on you in a way that suddenly becomes catastrophic. And we really want to give the people that we work with and then the teams that we manage the tools to know how to deal with that. So for us, just to really summarize this point, is we really want to be in that zone of optimal stress. We don't want to tip over and become exhausted. The minute you become exhausted, you open yourself up to problems around coping, anxiety, panic, and anger, and that very soon overwhelms you into the zone of breakdown. We see the zone of burnout or breakdown where no matter how motivated or engaged you may be, your well-being has just dropped so low that the gap is too large and you're no longer able to cope. When it gets to burnout, that is a mental health issue. And guys, it's, we've been working with some people, and it takes a long time to come back from burnout. And so the reality is to really, as soon as you enter this zone where you're feeling exhausted, it is a call to action to do something about it. The 12 stages are just there to give you a bit of a guideline. But if you're at 2 and 3, I think you're into that early warning stage. It's not something you should worry about, but it could creep up on you, and you need to be aware. So If we want to avoid burnout and we want to build in mechanisms to energize and to make sure that we are forever recharging our batteries, how do we go about building resilience? For us, it's really about identifying what your potential is, turning your innate potential, your talents into excellence, into using your strengths, not trying to fix your weaknesses, and then building in that. If I'm going to be excellent, I need also time to recover, much like any sportsman we've seen. You can't be excellent all the time. You need to build in recovery time. And so this is about building what we call a resilience continuum. And we use what we call the EASE process: excellence, alert, support, and enjoyment. So what's excellence? Excellence, and this is really about building that capacity, is what can you do better than most when it's needed most? And this is a great way of thinking about when you're working with your team, looking at the people that report to you. What can they do better than most? Or what can one person bring to the party more than somebody else when it's needed most? This is really called playing to your strengths, and it's about being in that zone of excellence. The way to think about excellence in this sense is, can you imagine if I asked you to do the following? If I asked you to take your non-dominant hand and to write with it, and I put you under pressure and I asked you to write out large paragraphs of information very quickly under high pressure with your non-dominant hand, you'd be very stressed. That's what it feels like for people that do not play in their strength space on a daily basis. And some people are so mismatched in terms of what they do that it feels like they're writing with their non-dominant hand for the entire 8 hours they're at work. So we want to keep you in that zone of excellence where you can contribute the most. We want to be alert for the warning signs that indicate that you're toppling over from optimal stress into that zone where you could be approaching burnout. We want to know from a management point of view what support you need, what support helps you focus on what your extreme best is. And then enjoyment. What activities help you recover? What clues to enjoyment do your strengths offer? So from a management point of view, what we're saying is, how can we arrange work in such a way that it gets the best out of our people by playing to what they're good at, not perhaps what they're not good at? We want to be alert to distress. A lot of managers go, well, I saw distress, but I didn't know what to do with it, or I thought the person will get offended if I spoke to them. But you need to be alert to approaching distress. What support can you provide to help them and keep them into that excellence zone? And then, guys, work doesn't have to be war. It can also be enjoyable. And when we play to our strengths, work is more enjoyable. It's where our power and edge lies. And we need to find those activities that help us. So we've talked a lot about what supports this, which is a strength-based approach. So strengths for us are those innate talents, behaviors, ways of thinking that a person is naturally predisposed to as part of who they are. So if you know the strengths of somebody, you can help them to be excellent. You can start to be alert to the warning signs. You know what support they need, and you can start to see what aspects or what activity helps them to recover. Time and space for recovery is so mission critical. From a strength point of view, Gallup has identified 34 strengths, which we break down into 4 categories or domains. So everybody needs to be able to execute, build those great relationships at work that they need to. They need to be able to think through what they do, so strategic thinking. And then the final one is influencing. None of us can operate in all 4 areas at equal levels. We have pockets of excellence in some areas, but not in another. That does not mean that those areas where we don't have excellence are lost to us. We can use what we do have in interesting ways or intentional ways to show up in other areas. But I'm going to give you a good example of how strengths can help us to think about resilience. So I mentioned that strengths comes into 4 categories or domains: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Now, if you know your own strengths pattern, like Margriet and myself introduced ourselves today, or you know your team's strength pattern, you can start to see where the zone of excellence is, where I can start to reach, what might be a distress or a red flag, and then importantly, how I recover. So I'm going to share how to navigate this. I'm going to use myself as an example, and then I'm going to ask Margriet to come in and also share her experiences of that. The way to read this, and I'll just use an example of execution. So if we start here, when I'm executing, a good result is I'm producing more with less. So I'm productive. And so I can use my achiever or my deliberative to play into that space. If I want to stretch and build the capacity to deal with those headwinds, my reach would be prioritization, autonomy on how work is done. So what will reach or increase my stress if you are managing me, if you don't allow me to prioritize and you want to micromanage me and not give me autonomy to get work done, my unnecessary stress will increase. So that could be a flag to watch out for. Something definitely that is a red flag for those with execution or high execution is that we tend to work tirelessly, sometimes towards outdated or misaligned goals. So this idea of, am I working hard because it's important, valuable, or something that is mission critical, or am I just endlessly working harder and harder, perhaps like a hamster on a wheel? That could be a red flag in this space. And then for people with high executing, it's very important to plan and anticipate rest, write recovery into a task form, and create the space where I can just breathe and re-energize so that I can drive my result, stretch my reach, avoid the red flags. If I look at strategic thinking, so my dominance in my top 5 is executing and strategic thinking. I'm always trying to find a better way forward. My reach is challenged by solving complex and important problems. Red flag sometimes is operating on faulty information or misunderstanding the end goal. And my recovery really is feeding my curiosity and studying something interesting unrelated to work. During COVID, Margriet really helped me to work with the balance between my strategic thinking and executing. Because during COVID lockdown 5 in Johannesburg, for those that were in South Africa at that time, we really were confined to our houses. Nothing was much happening, and it really frustrated my execution. Why did it frustrate my execution? Is because I was working tirelessly on goals and things that no longer were relevant or mattered or things that I could impact. I also had no autonomy in terms of how work was done. We were stuck at home and I really just couldn't get anything done. And so my sort of stress really went from 2 to 5 to 6 to 7 until Margriet said, just remember, you may not be able to physically get things done or do work in the way you used to because you're stuck at home. But that doesn't mean that you can't re-energize or reprioritize by working in your other strength zone. And so that was like a light bulb moment, because what I did is I stopped trying to do the impossible, which was work in this space during COVID, and I spent more time in this space. So during the time of COVID, we were able to reconceptualize what BHG does. We were able to really backfill some of our products and services. And the minute the doors open, we were able to relaunch our business in a very successful manner. And what Margriet really taught me around my resilience was, had I got stuck in the executing space, I can tell you now, I think my wife, the kids, and the dogs would have booted me out of the house regardless. What I was able to do is take my energy from that space, put it into that space, and I discovered that actually thinking is real work. And I was very busy reprioritizing what we needed to do in the BHG space. And I was able then to backfill on relationship and influencing. If I look at the recovery around execution, which is plan and anticipate risk, right recovery in a task form, what that means to me personally is that every Sunday afternoon, I actually book time in my diary that says do nothing. And I spend that time and I do force myself to do nothing. And at the end of the hour, the reassurance that I have is I can literally tick it off from my diary saying something's being completed. I've done the task of doing nothing. But if you do not build in recovery into your work, your home, and so forth, as an individual, your energy dissipates. You've got to be very careful around managing the energy level, which is half the battle around resilience. And then how do you manage your energy level is to make sure that you keep in the zone of result and reach, using the red flags to avoid disappearing into that burnout zone. You'll notice from examples that Marita and myself have been sharing with you that whilst I am strong in strategic thinking and executing, or just did it the other way around, I often work with her from a relationship building, and together we're able to build BHG resilience as a team because we're stronger together by working in our zones of expertise and energy than we are doing it one at a time. So what are the resilience lessons now for you as a team lead? The first one is resilience can be built and developed. So by knowing your strengths, you can develop your execution, your influencing, your relationship building, and strategic thinking in such a way that you are able to habitually produce great results. You can stretch and reach for excellence, but you're doing it in a balanced way that you can avoid burnout. You're doing it in a balanced way because you are addressing and you're very open to the red flags, and you're always spending time on recovery. So whilst we don't have time today to delve deeply into this, I'm sure that if you are thinking about this yourself, you would have probably have intimated or come across things like, am I close to the burnout zone? What level of burnout or stress am I experiencing, 1 through to 12? What am I good at? Executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Am I at the top of my game in those areas? Are there any red flags? And I can tell you now, none of us have built in enough recovery. That's the default, is that we can do reach and we can really go to the well often, but often we do not build enough recovery time. So guys, all 34 of the strengths can be both helpful to build resilience, but it can also be a blind spot or hindrance. And what we teach in the Resilience Masterclass is how to use all 34 strengths in a helpful rather than a hindrance way. And we work through the team and help the team understand where they're strong at in terms of executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking, where each one of them can contribute their best using the ease model, and what are the red flags and how can we address them and build in recovery time. So it may be a bit strange to think of it this way because as managers, we are always consumed by filling the diaries, driving performance. But part of that is also building some respite, having fun, building that recovery time. The other key thing about working with resilience in teams is one size does not fit all. We want to build a resilience development plan for each individual because each individual is unique in their own right. What will work for me will not work for Margriet, for example. And so our mantra is change your workplace. It can be a little to a lot every single day. But if you are stuck and you're doing the same things in the same way, you are heading for that burnout zone. So it doesn't require a revolution, but we want to change a little bit every single day to help. So what are the tools to help build your resilience? We've already intimated and give you a sense around strengths, but it all starts with knowing your Clifton strength results. This is a great picture and it gives you a view of the strength assessment report. And essentially what you do is you take the Clifton Strength Assessment. It helps you identify those strengths that you are most dominant in, your 1 to 10. It also then goes down to your full 34. We're not particularly interested in the ones below because they're not your dominant. The question then becomes, how can I use my dominant strengths in executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking to be in my zone of power and edge? And if you're in your zone of power and edge and you keep replenishing that, you are going to be resilient from a strength point of view. For those that are interested in the Clifton Strength Assessment, you can go to our webpage for more information, and you're very welcome to reach out to us. We'll answer any questions you may have. Before I stop and allow all the great questions that we anticipate, E.B. White reminds us of this: hang on to your hat, hang on to your hope, and wind the clock, for tomorrow is another day.